You do not have to go deep into the wilderness to run into hantavirus risk. For some people, the moment of exposure is painfully ordinary. Opening a cabin that has been shut for months, sweeping a garage floor, cleaning out a shed, picking up after mice in a storage room. That is what makes this topic so important. Not because hantavirus is common, it is not. But because the risky situations can feel normal enough that people let their guard down. And here's the tension. In the United States, hantavirus disease is rare. But when it becomes serious, it can become serious very fast. So this is not a panic video. It is a practical video. By the end, you'll know the 7 facts that matter most, the symptom people miss, the one cleanup mistake that raises risk, and what the recent antivirus headlines do and do not mean. Part of the reason hantavirus is back on people's radar is that recent CDC alerts put attention on antivirus and travel-linked cases. That matters because antivirus is the main hantavirus known to spread from person to person, although that kind of spread is still uncommon and usually linked to close contact with someone who is sick. That balance matters. A disease can be rare, it can still be dangerous, and it can still be worth understanding. Think of it like a house fire. Most homes do not catch fire this year, but you still want to know where the exits are, what smoke smells like, and what not to do when something sparks. That is what this video is about. Not fear, preparedness. Here's how we're going to break this down. First, what hantavirus actually is. Second, how people usually get exposed. Third, the one major exception to the not contagious rule. Fourth, the symptoms that can fool you. Fifth, the red flag symptom that changes everything. Sixth, what treatment really looks like. And seventh, the cleanup method that could lower your risk more than any internet hack ever will. Because with hantavirus, the basics matter. A lot. Let's start with the first surprising fact. Hantavirus is rare, but it can become serious very fast. Hantaviruses are a family of viruses spread mainly by rodents. In the Americas, they are linked more often with hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, or HPS, which mainly affects the lungs. In parts of Europe and Asia, they are more often linked with hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, or HFRS, which can affect the kidneys and blood vessels. For most people watching this video in the US, the lung form is the one you are more likely to hear about. And what makes HPS scary is not that everybody gets it. It is that once the breathing phase begins, the illness can accelerate quickly. Early on, it may feel like a bad viral illness, fever, fatigue, muscle aches. Then, days later, coughing and shortness of breath can appear as fluid builds in the lungs. That timeline matters, because the person who felt flu-ish on Monday can look much sicker by Thursday. And that is one reason early recognition matters so much. Now here is where it gets even more important. Most people do not get this from another person. Most hantavirus infections begin with rodent exposure. Not a handshake, not casual contact in a store, not walking past someone on the street. People are usually infected through contact with infected rodents or their urine, droppings, saliva, or contaminated materials. That often means exposure in spaces where mice or rats have been active and where dust gets stirred up. That is why the risk settings are so ordinary. A shed, a garage, a barn, an attic, a crawl space, a storage unit, a cabin closed all winter, a campsite with rodent activity. The virus does not care whether the place looks dramatic. It cares whether rodents were there. And health advice needs to stay honest here. Not everyone has the same ability to avoid rodent exposure. Older housing, farm work, temporary lodging, and disaster cleanup can all raise risk. So prevention should not sound like blame. It should sound like support. The goal is not shame. The goal is safer choices where possible. But there is one major exception to the "not from other people" rule, and that detail matters. This may be the most important distinction in the whole video. Most hantaviruses are not known to spread person to person, but antivirus is the key exception. Antivirus is the main hantavirus known to spread from one person to another. It is found in South America, and when spread happens, it is usually linked to close contact with someone who is sick. That does not mean it spreads easily in everyday life. It means the risk is more specific, more limited. Usually closer contact. Usually a much narrower exposure story. So when headlines say, "Hantavirus spreads between people," that needs context. For most hantaviruses, that is not true. Antivirus is the reason public health agencies make that distinction. And that is why precise language matters. When health communication loses nuance, people either panic or dismiss the risk. Neither response helps. And the next fact explains why early illness can be so easy to miss. Hantavirus does not always announce itself clearly. Early symptoms can include fever, fatigue, muscle aches, headache, chills, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. These symptoms can look a lot like the flu or another common viral illness. That overlap is a big deal, because if you only look at symptoms, you might think, "I've got a flu bug. I ate something bad. I'm just run down." And sometimes that will be true. But symptoms are only half the story. The other half is exposure history. Did you just clean a rodent-infested shed? Did you open a dusty cabin? Did you sweep droppings in a closed garage? Did you sleep in a place where rodents were active? Did you have close contact with someone known to have antivirus? That context can change how a clinician thinks. So here is the rule to remember. Flu-like symptoms plus a rodent exposure story should never stay a secret. Tell the doctor. Tell urgent care. Tell the ER. And if one symptom shows up after likely exposure, the situation stops being routine. If there is one symptom to remember from this video, it is this. Shortness of breath after likely hantavirus exposure is an emergency. A person may start with fever, fatigue, and muscle aches. Then, several days later, cough and shortness of breath can appear as the lungs fill with fluid. That is not a wait-and-see symptom. That is a get urgent medical care now symptom. People sometimes minimize breathing changes because they do not want to overreact. They think, maybe I'm anxious, maybe I'm just tired, maybe it's allergies. But breathing trouble after a meaningful exposure story is not the moment to talk yourself out of care. This is one of those situations where being early is better than being brave. And here is the hard truth that makes timing even more important. A lot of people assume that if a virus is dangerous, there must already be a standard drug that specifically targets it. With hantavirus, that is not the reality. There is no widely approved specific treatment for hantavirus infection. Care is supportive. That means helping the body through the illness with oxygen, fluids, monitoring, and treatment of complications. In severe cases, a person may need breathing support or intensive care. That can sound discouraging, but it should sharpen the message. Early care still matters. A lot. Supportive care is not doing nothing. Supportive care can save lives. Think of it like a flooded house. You may not be able to stop the rain in that moment, but the right response still changes the outcome. That is why recognizing symptoms early is not just helpful, it can be life-saving. And the next fact may be the most practical one in the entire video because it starts before anyone gets sick. This is where instinct can work against you. Most people see droppings and think, grab a broom, grab a vacuum, clean it fast, but that can raise risk. The safer approach is to wet disinfect first. Spray the droppings and the surrounding area until fully soaked. Let it sit, then wipe the material up with paper towels or other disposable supplies. Bag the waste, clean the area again, wash your hands well. Why does that matter? Because dry sweeping or vacuuming can push contaminated particles into the air. So the safer cleanup logic is simple. Do not launch dust, wet it first, then wipe it up. It is the opposite of the fast, dry cleanup most people do on autopilot. If you remember only one prevention step from this whole video, make it this one. Let's make this real. You open a shed. You see droppings in the corner. Now what? First, stop. Do not start sweeping. Second, get what you need. Gloves, disinfectant, paper towels, a trash bag. Third, soak the droppings and contaminated area until fully wet. Let it sit for the recommended time. Fourth, wipe up the material with disposable paper towels. Fifth, throw the waste away and clean the surrounding area again. Sixth, wash your hands carefully after removing gloves. Simple. Not glamorous, but this is what lowers risk. And notice what is missing from this list. No miracle spray, no trendy hack, no internet folklore. Just good infection control basics. When hantavirus hits the news, the coverage often swings between two bad extremes. Extreme 1, this is nothing, it's rare. Extreme 2, this is the next disaster. Neither is useful. The reality is more grounded. Yes, hantavirus is rare in the US. Yes, severe respiratory disease can be deadly. Yes, Andes virus matters because it is the known person-to-person exception. And yes, public health agencies can take a cluster seriously while still saying the overall public risk remains extremely low. That is not contradiction. That is nuance. A problem can deserve respect without deserving panic. Myth. If it's rare, I do not need to know about it. Fact. Rare diseases still matter when the exposure setting is common and the consequences can be severe. Myth. Hantavirus usually spreads like a cold. Fact. Most hantaviruses spread through rodent exposure, not routine person-to-person contact. Andes virus is the main documented exception. Myth. If I just have fever and body aches, it cannot be serious. Fact. Early hantavirus symptoms can look like flu. Exposure history is what changes the picture. Myth. The fastest way to clean droppings is to sweep them up. Fact. Wet disinfect first. Do not sweep or vacuum dry contaminated material. Myth. If there is no targeted drug, medical care will not help. Fact. Early supportive care matters and can be life-saving. This video matters for anyone, but especially for people who clean sheds, garages, barns, attics, crawl spaces, or storage units, stay in cabins or rural lodging, camp in places with rodent activity, work in farming, construction, cleanup, or maintenance, or live in places where rodent control is a constant challenge. This is not about assuming you are in danger every day. It is about matching your habits to your environment. If your life or work puts you near rodent mess, this information is not random trivia. It is safety information. Let's bring it home. Number 1, Hantavirus is rare, but severe cases can get dangerous fast. Number 2, most infections start with rodents, not other people. Number 3, antivirus is the main person-to-person exception. Number 4, early symptoms can look like flu. Number 5, shortness of breath after likely exposure is a medical emergency. Number 6, there is no widely approved specific treatment, so early supportive care matters. Number 7, never sweep or vacuum dry rodent droppings. Wet disinfect first. Here is your one practical step for today. Save this video so you have the cleanup steps ready if you ever need them. Then make a plan now for what you would do if you found rodent droppings tomorrow. Not when you are tired. Not when you are in a rush. Now. Know where your gloves are. Know what disinfectant you would use. And remember the rule. Wet first, wipe second, never sweep dry. For more calm, evidence-based health content that helps you protect yourself and your family without fear, subscribe to CareThrive. This content is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your doctor or a qualified healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine.